President Biden, who officially announced his re-election bid last week, may have to forfeit his first contest in New Hampshire to challengers Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Marianne Williamson. Politics reporter at Semafor Dave Weigel is here to tell us why. Welcome, Dave.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So fill us in. I assume the case is it's not that Joe Biden is scared to death of Marianne and RFK Jr. and is conceding in humiliation, but perhaps I'm wrong. What's the deal?
No, they're not scared to death. They're more in denial that New Hampshire is never going to delay its primary, or not going to concede to having South Carolina vote first. So this is all explained, I think, very, very well by Alex Seiswald and MSNBC, and all his details are correct. There's this very thorny debate about the primary schedule. Not to get too deep into it, the problem is that New Hampshire state law says they have the first primary. They are going to hold a primary. Republicans are going to compete in it. What Democrats say they'll do is sanction that so that, all right, the New Hampshire primary on paper exists, but it's not going to count. If you compete, you're not going to get delegates from it. They can do that. The parties have the ability to bend reality. They've done it before. But the issue is Marianne Williamson has campaigned there multiple times. Robert F. Kennedy has not been on the trail yet. He's doing more media interviews. But if you poll New Hampshire, he does pretty well. It's not clear if Democrats will place Joe Biden on the ballot there. You might have a situation where there's a write-in vote for Joe Biden, and I will get to this. But it's all very meta. It's all very media-focused story, because the question is, can they get the media to not care who wins the New Hampshire primary on the Democratic side?
So when we talk about these states that have it in law that they must either have the first caucus or have the first primary, that is fascinating to me, because we're also told that what happens in a primary is party business and therefore not subject to laws that we have to regulate elections and ensure they're fair. I'm thinking of, the primary being rigged against Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020. How do these two things shake out? Like, to what degree is this party business, and to what degree do you see it maybe should be regulated by law?
Well, Sanders got fewer votes in those primaries, which is the bigger problem, but I'm just being obnoxious. I'm not going to get too deep into that. A lot of Democratic rules are built as on state laws that are unwieldy, on party systems in those states that are unwieldy. And then when they get to the room in D.C. that sets these rules, they've been trying to coordinate them so that, okay, well, we're going to have states voting over the period of perhaps 6 months. By the end of this, we'll have a nominee that's electable. How can we recreate the smoke-filled room? So you're right that the Sanders got into the 16 race when everyone already endorsed Hillary Clinton. You're going to have primaries anyway. How do we make sure those primaries don't really stop the momentum of the candidate we want? In that way, I think it is rig a bull in a sense. This is a different situation where Robert F. Kennedy and Marianne Williamson are going after constituencies of Democrats that have not really emerged. I'm very happy saying there's not sort of vaccine skeptical groundswell in the Democratic Party that like there is a left that has been beaten down by 8 years of the Obama administration not listening to it. You have in Joe Biden somebody who's solved some of the problems that Hillary had with the base. He is a front runner, but the primary relies on these states having elections and counting things quickly. I mean, New Hampshire is not as derided by Democrats as Iowa is, because Iowa had a party-run system because the state doesn't do it, the party does. The party did an awful job counting votes in 2020, did an awful job counting it in 2016. The system confuses everyone who's not Iowan or a reporter, and that they don't matter anymore. New Hampshire has a fast-counting primary. That's been some of their argument for holding this. South Carolina has a pretty fast-counting primary, but Republicans control the state legislature at supermajority, whatever they want, they can do. They're not going to move the primary up to make it easy on Democrats. So what you said, and again, I didn't want to be too disagreeable. I would agree to the premise that 2016 was rigged or 2020 was rigged. But what the party can do in public to control its process is put the finger on the scale for the candidates it wants in the process. And what it has done in New Hampshire is lost control to people who are going to be on the ballot, going to be running, do not care if they get sanctioned, do not care if they say the wrong thing on TV, do not care if they get no delegates out of it, because they're going to get media attention, and they're going to get people saying, hey, I voted as a protest for Marianne Williamson, or I voted for Robert F. Kennedy because I agree with him. You didn't count my vote. The premise you were saying at the start, there are going to be people at the end of this process who say, this party didn't have fair rules so my candidate got to compete. Now, Republicans did this in 2020. Nobody cared. I mean, they basically canceled the South Carolina primary and it awarded the delegates to Donald Trump. But there's not the same groundswell. I think it's a more coherent party at the moment than Democrats. You have a lot of factions that do feel that things can get ripped off the way that the parties have structured this. And they don't want to hear about, it's up to South Carolina to set the primary date. They're like, how come we can't just get a debate and everyone on the stage and an election on our terms? And they're not going to get one.
Meanwhile, as NBC News describes RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson as, quote, fringe candidates, the latest Fox poll shows them with a combined 28% of Democratic primary votes compared to Biden's 62%. Dave, and you were there for the RFK Jr. announcement, and you described a really fascinating turnout of a real mix of people. Some former Biden supporters, many conservatives, right-wing people, some true independents, etc. They're being described as fringe, but they're polling at a combined, as what I just said, 28%. It's not like 1% and 2%, but the mainstream media obviously is they blurred part of an interview they did with RFK Jr. And fine, you can think what he says about those subjects is wrong. I certainly think what he says about a lot of subjects is wrong. But I don't know about the fringe framing. What are you making of all this?
Yeah, I agree that it's not seemly for the media to say who is fringe and who isn't. And I think it's good for Kennedy in general. If it's not the best vote-winning tactic, it's good for him to have that argument, because you can say, okay, what I'm saying is fringe. The thing that you heard from federal officials about masks not working in May, before that, March 2020, that was fake. Are you a conspiracy theorist? So I don't feel that's productive for members of the media who don't have. I think we're all in it, but you can take another poll. Do you trust the media or do you trust the politicians? People think that it is skewed against them. I don't think that's a huge problem for Kennedy. I think the fact is that if he is identified as a vaccine skeptic, the Democratic coalition at the moment, across all racial groups, likes vaccines, thinks they work, think it's irritating when conservatives don't want to take them. They supported vaccine mandates, which he didn't support. When Kennedy gets, I think, some traction with them, it's criticizing Donald Trump for being opportunistic and saying that he was always against this stuff when he wasn't. But right now, I think, and if you look at the polling, it's a pretty good cross section of Democrats, higher with younger Democrats. What you're seeing there are people who just think Joe Biden is 80 years old. He's going to be 82. He's disappointed me on. I think the substance I hear most often is like Willow and other approval of projects that get carbon out of the ground. They want a protest candidate. Robert F. Kennedy's name is well known. Marianne Williamson, I think the fact that she's polling around 9% is even more significant. I'm not trying to say that her number, smaller number, is bigger than the Robert F. Kennedy number. I'm saying the Kennedy name is quite famous. The Williamson name is. She was a candidate who was made fun of on Saturday Night Live, and 1 in 11 Democrats say, sure, I'd vote for her. What are my options? I'm worried that Joe Biden is too old. So we're going to see. It's unknowable right now. Once the president starts going out there getting support from Democrats, there are a lot of people in the party who are unhappy with what he's achieved and who don't think that he can win or serve a full term, and they're not allowed to really voice that. I mean, you saw the backlash Nikki Haley for saying Biden might not survive his second term. Look, that's a gauche thing to say, but it's a thing that I've heard voters bring up. So they have options now that are not approved by the party. I think it's a good position for RFK and Williamson to be in. I mean, bring back to Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders wanted to win that nomination. Bernie Sanders had to deal with an Iowa count that was terrible, with Democrat superdelegates endorsing Hillary Clinton before he could get traction. But he wanted to win that nomination. I think in Williamson and RFK, they're in this to change the conversation in the party without a strategy to win the nomination necessarily. That's a great position to criticize everything about the way the party runs its primary and every issue that it leaves out of out of its official debate. They're going to keep saying we're not getting a debate. I think people in the media are going to say, "Oh, of course you're not," because you're RFK and Marianne Williamson. He's the president. Presidents don't debate. There are lots of people who are going to say, "I want at least some sort of choice, some sort of evidence that Joe Biden can take and give a punch before I vote for him again."
Dave, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.